Welcome to A Healthy Curiosity, the podcast that explores what it takes to be well in a busy world. With self-care strategies from Chinese medicine, functional medicine, Ayurveda, neuroscience, and beyond. I'm your host, Brody Welch, a licensed acupuncturist and transformation catalyst, here to support you on your journey of health, happiness, and personal evolution. Hello and welcome to today's show. Thanks so much for tuning in. I'm curious how you are taking action on the things that are important to you in this new year. If those things have anything to do with health and wellness, just know that my Level Up program is launching in just a couple of weeks, and there is still room if you want some help with that. Visit brodywelch.com/level-up. One of the things that I'm committing to for the new year is to be a better ally for people of color and members of other non-dominant groups. Now, this involves basically re-educating myself on the subjects of white privilege and racism. And I figured this is fair game to talk about here on A Healthy Curiosity because we're all connected and healthy individuals need healthy communities. And certainly racism has got to be one of the most toxic factors that we have in our society, leading to physical and psycho-emotional harm each and every day for all of us, but especially people of color. So it's something we need to be talking about and challenging the status quo around. And as a white woman living in a very white state, I realize my own limitations in doing so. Nonetheless, this podcast is my platform, and since racism certainly affects whether or not we are able to be well in a busy world, it's at least incumbent upon me to try. And I'm going to do this imperfectly. The conversation that you're about to hear was difficult for me to have because I wanted to have it perfectly. I wanted to be the perfect anti-racist ally, and of course, I am not there yet. My guest, Erica Courdae, uses the term white presenting at one point in the conversation to refer to a person who's taken to be white. Later in the conversation, I use the same term, white presenting, to refer to myself because I indeed present as white. I look like a white woman. But because my dad was adopted and I don't really know what other ancestries I might claim, and because I've long understood the notion that race is a social construct, I thought that was okay. After the interview, I reflected on whether my use of this term in relation to myself minimized the experience of people of mixed ethnicities, because I most definitely look like a white woman and enjoy the white privilege that goes along with that. So if I did offend anyone in the use of that term, I apologize in advance. While race may be a construct, racism is very real. The unconscious mental filters that we use to look at each other are very real, and as are the access to resources and opportunities and representation or lack thereof. But this conversation isn't really about being politically correct. It's about hearing and seeing each other. If we have a seat at the table, I believe it's incumbent upon us to make that table bigger and to amplify the voices that might not be heard as readily. The point is also to not let perfection stand in the way of acting, even if it means acting imperfectly. So while I'm confessing to things I wish I could be saying better on the podcast, I'm trying to evolve my language to be more inclusive of people who are non-binary. I grew up in an age where saying he or she was more inclusive than just using a masculine pronoun to represent humanity. And as the child of two writers to whom using a plural pronoun to refer to an individual was anathema, it's hard for me to break this habit. So to my non-binary listeners, just know that I'm working on trading he or she for they. And I promise that you'll hear me screw it up, perhaps even in this episode later on. The thing is, these conversations about race, inclusion, and privilege are not easy to have, and I'm not even sure what perfect looks like. And it is in this spirit that I give you this conversation on Imperfect Allyship with Erica Courdae. Hello, and welcome to today's show. Those of you who listen in to A Healthy Curiosity on the regular know that in Chinese medicine, health is about the balance of everything in our internal ecosystems, and that our internal ecosystem is connected with the larger ecosystem of our culture and our external environment. And we think about this in the context of buying organic food, not only because it's great for our own personal ecosystem to not have a bunch of glyphosate messing up our microbiome, but also because it's good for the planet. Like we're making a statement in that choice that we don't want that kind of thing in the environment for interfering with the natural state of things. We also talk about honoring your being and not just your doing as a brave act of culture change in this young addicted world, and that anytime you opt to live within your energetic integrity and draw the boundaries that you need to take care of yourself, you make it easier for the people around you to do the same. And it is in this spirit of health, as not just this personal phenomenon, but a transpersonal one, that I am excited to bring you today's conversation with Erica Courdae. Erica and I both spoke recently at She Podcast Live, and one of her talks was on imperfect allyship, which is the subject of today's conversation. Erica is an entrepreneur, a coach, and a consultant dedicated to expanding how multicultural professionals, managers, lawyers, coaches, and creative small business owners interact with the world. Through powerful conversations meant to create dialogue and connection, Erica seamlessly challenges them to perceive their reality through a different lens. Topics including diversity, equality, equity, and inclusion make for the awareness that she uses to create mind shifts for impact. In life and in business, Erica believes that talking about important and necessary topics in safe spaces creates change and helps people feel comfortable, open, honest, and forward focused. Erica, welcome to A Healthy Curiosity.
Thank you so much for having me, Brody. I'm so glad to be here.
I am delighted to have you here. And first off, we are going to talk about imperfect allyship. And I'd like you to, first of all, just let us know what that is and why it's important.
So, if you kind of think about the concept, you can think about it from an entire place of it is saying that I am standing with and advocating for people that I don't feel as though have the same level of access, security, safety, all the things that I have, and I choose to use my platform or my privilege or just my time and my effort to support them. And if you just kind of break it down, allyship is just saying that I stand with you and you being able to be considered an equal and to feel as though you can actually live as if you're an equal. And the imperfect part is just not telling yourself that you have to be perfect in all of your actions before you can actually do anything, and not convincing yourself that anything that is less than perfect is somehow invalidated. So I'm really like, go into action, do the thing. You will figure it out, just like every other aspect of real life.
Oh, that's so great. And I think probably there's no shortage of perfectionistic leaning people listening who might be either relieved or or perhaps daunted by the idea of like, okay, well, if I want to stand as an ally for someone, how do I do that? And what if I do it wrong? And maybe that fear of doing it imperfectly prevents them from doing it at all.
That's to me, that's the exact reason why most people don't move into just about any action, let alone something that can be as scary as allyship, because there's this fear of what happens if I don't do this correctly. And that's that can't be the reason why you stop, simply because there's always going to be something that you don't know. There's always going to be different information that becomes available. People have different viewpoints at different points in the entire evolution of this group or this movement or this thing that you are either rallying for or rallying against, if it's from a place of inequality. So if you were to say, I am standing for LGBTQIA, there were years ago where there weren't even half of those letters, let alone a
Yes.
symbol included. So if you looked at it like, oh, I don't want to get it wrong, then you still wouldn't be in action, because you would think, well, I don't know everything. I don't understand all the pieces of it. All you need to understand is that there are things that aren't okay, and you are willing to go into action in order to fix the disparity on some level.
Yeah, and it doesn't require going to the internet and doing a bunch of research in order to make that statement. That basically you can still say that you can even admit to being imperfect as you as you make those stands.
And I think it's important to say, you know, I don't know this and I am learning, or if someone is offended, because everyone's feelings are different. So one person may be offended, someone else may not. And that's just a place for you to say, this was not my intent, but I can see that this is what happened. I apologize. I That was not what I wanted to give to you. If you feel so inclined, I would love to know how I could do better, or take that as an opportunity to, on your own, do your research and learn how you can move forward differently. That's no different than any other skill or action that we embark on. We're all learning.
Really true. And our ability to be able to own our mistakes without it being a barrier to taking action is absolutely critical if we're going to move forward. I'm curious if you can make this a little bit more grounded in the everyday for people listening. So, in what kind of circumstances could allyship show up?
I'll use the example of, to start with, like, say, a parent. You're a parent and your child, they represent as white. And I say that because there are some children that may be biracial, they may be adopted, anything could happen, but your child tends to be white facing. And there is a child in this class that you can see is being treated differently than your child is being treated. And this is an opportunity where you could have a discussion with the teacher or with administration and say, hey, I'm kind of seeing what's going on. And I know that my child isn't treated this way. And I think that there may be some inequities or some things going on. Whatever it is, I think maybe there's a bigger discussion that can be had, because I then had to have a conversation with my child about XYZ and how life can be different for different people for reasons that they have no control over. So I feel like this is a teachable moment. And I need you, being this institution that I bring my child to on a daily basis, 5 days a week, to protect and to, teach them, to use this for good and not allow this to just sit.
That's a great example. So really just something that we see in our own lives, that where we suspect that there may be some bias at play, and
Hmm.
and being able to pose the question, to call out, this is what I'm seeing, this is what I'm observing. Could we what could be done here?
Right. And I think that it's very important to use your voice when these kinds of things happen, because a lot of the things that we see and that appear to be a normal part of the landscape nowadays is because, for who knows how long, depending on what the thing is you're talking about, how long did this go on and no one said anything? Whether it was out of fear or feeling ill equipped to be the one to speak up, or just not maybe even clearly understanding what it was that happened. So just not knowing how to have that conversation. And sometimes that can happen. There are times that things will happen and you'll say, I don't even know what happened here, but I know this doesn't feel good. So if you know that your energy is like, okay, wait a minute, something's wrong. And, maybe your spidey sense, so to speak, kind of is like, oh no, this isn't okay. And maybe you're not sure why. If nothing else, it's an opportunity for you to examine how you process things, how you see them, and possibly start dialogue. Maybe this is someone that is, in the line getting coffee, and you can just kind of see how maybe they said their name and the person behind the register kind of just gave them this, well, I don't know how to pronounce that. So can I just put the letter instead? And that can be a very diminishing thing. And maybe that's an opportunity for you to have a conversation with this person and say, I saw what happened. I'm really sorry that that happened to you. I want you to know that that kind of thing isn't okay. And I said something to the barista, and I just kind of wanted to apologize on the behalf of people that just are culturally insensitive.
So that's really just about, well, not to use the word just, that minimizes, but the idea of being human. Just having a human
Yes.
connection with another person, and letting that person know, hey, I saw this and I'm with you, in case that was a
Yes.
slight. Yeah. Oh, I love that. There was in one of the talks at She Podcast Live about showing up as feminists in our podcasts. There was, I don't know if you were in that one, but there was a young millennial woman of color who was talking about how the workplace was, she felt very vulnerable in the workplace because she was, that things were happening that she felt like weren't okay, but she didn't feel like, but just she just felt like, because by virtue of the fact that she was young, entry level, or kind of low person as far as the pecking order at the company, that her that it seemed scary to speak up. And so I'm wondering that how those conversations may go down differently in a workplace environment.
I think if done well, what can be helpful in a work environment is you have what should be a system of checks and balances in place with human resources, HR. And so having that, you can sometimes have a place where you can go with your grievance, or if there's kind of almost a comment box type of thing. If maybe you want to bring up the topic, but maybe you don't want to bring it up face to face. There's something like that that can happen. And I think there's a number of companies nowadays that are beginning to see the value in really bringing diversity, equity, and inclusion as concepts into their culture and making them more than simply concepts. So it could be an opportunity to maybe speak with someone in a place of authority or influence to be able to say, hey, I think that there's some things that could happen that could lead to this being a more conducive environment to people feeling seen, feeling heard, feeling as though their voice and their actions are actually lending themselves to the greater collective whole that we're all here for. And if you find that you go to HR or kind of whatever the area is within your organization that is going to be representative of company culture and things like that, and you're not being heard, then it could possibly be a signal that this isn't the best place for you. Because if you're not allowed to bring your whole self, then not only are you missing out and having to carry that, but then you're not able to truly bring the full benefit of what you have to offer because you have to segment yourself. So if it gives you an opportunity to really go through what it is that you want and what you need, and if this is a good match, sometimes there can be a benefit in a less than beneficial situation.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, that not every environment is going to be conducive to everyone's thriving. And that's true whether it's simply just, well, for whatever reason, that something is either a good fit or not. It's kind of terrible that we live in a world where it's that just by virtue of who we are, that if it's not important to other people at the workplace, that may not be a good fit for us. It's like that, but that's where we're at this point. And
Yeah.
I'm curious about things that are less overt, right? It's sometimes easier to call out something that is glaring and insulting, and stand up and say that is not okay, as opposed to the more subtle, maybe even, well, it's just the more subtle something is, the more plausibly deniable it is, I suppose, or the more difficult it may be to call something out in a way that doesn't seem like you're picking a fight. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that.
And it's funny because I think sometimes that can be kind of what sometimes you'll hear called a microaggression, for example, which is someone that says something like, "Oh, your name's really hard to produce. Like you're Muslim or something, right?" And you're like, that wasn't technically wrong, but that felt kind of off." And so sometimes it can be something that's passive aggressive. And when these types of things come up, it's a good example of something maybe not being as overt, yet being no less damaging, hurtful, or painful. when these types of things come up. You know, if someone meets a woman and her child with her, and she's like, "Oh, are you a single mom? And what if she lost her husband? What if her husband was away at war?" Like, it's the kind of thing where you need to just kind of be aware of what's being said. And so if you find yourself in a place and you're hearing something or contemplating saying something that maybe you wouldn't say to a different type of person, then maybe it needs to be held. If you're in a situation and you're hearing this said, I think that you can sometimes say, "Hey, we really don't have to do that. That's not cool." Because sometimes it doesn't always have to be a big conversation. Sometimes it can be acknowledging this isn't okay, redirecting and moving from there. Because I do think that if you take every single thing and it becomes a big knockdown, drag out thing, then it is possible that when you bring shame and guilt and blame to it, that you can shut people down. Now, there are times that I think that that is just going to be what it is when it is just a really big transgression. But there are times when it really just can kind of be a simple acknowledgement, redirect, and maybe a conversation if necessary. And maybe that conversation is in private.
That's, I think, a really important point, that we don't want necessarily to blow up little things into bigger things. At the same time, the word microaggression, I feel like, needs a different synonym, because it sounds like it's necessarily a little deal, but it's comments that can be, or that are racist or homophobic or xenophobic in some way, can be just as painful and just as isolating, and for people who are on the receiving end of that. And so, that being able to call something out in a way that is clear, but not necessarily over the top. I think that makes a lot of sense.
And I honestly think that it's an aggression is an aggression, and
Yeah.
that the micro part of it just kind of finds a way to soften it and make it a little bit more palatable for those that aren't on the receiving end of it. So because it's not meant for you, maybe you don't hear it, kind of like a dog whistle kind of thing.
Yes. And that's like, also, I think that I hear that term get kicked around from people who are maybe the boomer generation, thinking that kids these days just can't, are wither as snowflakes under any,
Too
yeah,
sensitive,
exactly.
yes.
And at the same time, that, to me, that seems so diminishing to the experience, the very real experience that people are having. And I do think that it's a different conversation, right? To talk about people, like, for example, college campuses needing to be such safe spaces that we can't even talk about race or class or gender or whatever, that
Yes.
because someone's going to get their feelings hurt. And that's really missing the point. And it's real that really the kind of safe conversations that you're talking about, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say, like, it's not about making language so careful and nuanced that no one's feelings are in any way stepped on at any point. It's much more about maybe broadening people's sense of what is in fact respectful to different groups of people.
Absolutely. And that's why when I talk on my podcast, Pause on the Play, we talk pretty unfiltered because in my opinion, I believe that conversation is a large part of it. So if you're not talking, then it's virtually impossible for anyone to understand the reality that other people are living on a day in and day out basis, unless they step out of their own and consider that their reality is not the only reality. And that if
Yes.
you soften everything to a fault, then you hit this point where nothing has impact anymore. And if there's a point where you're like, well, my feelings are hurt, then it's like, okay, well, that might hurt, but I need you to consider that that's possibly, a drop in the bucket of what this other person is experiencing. It's like if someone says, oh, I can't be an imperfect ally, it's just too scary, it's too uncomfortable. Then if you say, okay, so a trans woman of color that has to worry about whether or not she's going to be able to come home at night, her safety, that is a bigger concern. So if yours is so sensitive that you can't consider that some people literally just aren't safe, then you do need that reality check.
That's such an important point that really that yeah, look, we those of us in positions of privilege by virtue of the fact that membership in any sort of dominant group, it is on us to make sure that everyone else has the same amount of safety, security, representation, ability to make an impact. And it's the kind of thing where we're all in this together, and the racist, sexist, transphobic, et cetera, all of the isms that are still there are going to perpetuate unless we actively work to change it. And the way that we do that is by talking to each other, connecting at a heart level.
Absolutely. It has to happen. And the only way that you can even have on your radar what needs to shift is to first acknowledge that there are things that need to be shifted. Because, and honestly, what you just said, it really triggered a big thing for me in that when people start feeling insecure, oh, I can't give rights to all of these people, or what's this take away from me? People, it is not pie. There is
Right.
enough to go around.
Exactly. Well, and at the same time, it's like it is pie in the sense that from a systemic racism standpoint, for example, it's like, yeah, like the slices of pie have been divvied out unequally, and
Yes,
there is things that we need to do at a systemic level to make sure that doesn't keep happening.
agreed.
This episode is brought to you by my Healthy Habits course, Level Up Your Life. Since autopilot dictates about 40% of what happens to us every day, wouldn't it be great if those autopilot routines were the ones we needed to thrive? They could be.
Doing this work of habit change with a supportive coach and a network of allies allowed the foundation of my daily habits to automate. I'm now free to move through the world with greater ease and to focus my energy on what matters most.
You don't have to default to stress, overwhelm, and numbing out. Step by step, you can lay the foundation for abundant energy, resilience, confidence, and trust in your body. If it's time for you to start a new groove, whether it's meditation or exercise, getting more sleep, or speaking more kindly to yourself, I'd love for you to consider Level Up Your Life. It's so hard to change habits on your own, and so much easier when you have a group of like-minded peers all working towards similar goals. We get rolling for the next round in January 2020, so now is the time to apply. The first 5 people to enroll are going to get a super sweet early bird discount, so today would be an excellent day to head to brodywelch.com and apply. I want to talk about privilege a little bit, just because it's the kind of thing that it's a privilege to not see your own privilege. And so
Mm-hmm.
for a lot of people, it may be, the fact that I present as white, and I am someone who feels very strongly about, well, really, like I think when I first became conscious of privilege, it was such a heavy burden, because I felt like I had no right to even do anything, because by virtue of the accident of my race and socioeconomic situation that I was born into, and that therefore, like, it's impossible to do enough, right? And at the same time, so even though like that realization dawned for me as a teenager, I still feel like in my 40s, I'm still learning about ways in which things went my way in life, and just the freedom to not have to think about race every day, the freedom to not have to be talking about it day in and day out, which is something that I'm now actively trying to do with my white friends. Is like, let's interrogate what it means to be white. Let's interrogate what it means to not necessarily have, or the idea that we can choose or not choose to look at this as an issue. Even that is itself an example of privilege, in the same way that when someone is a member of a non-dominant group or presents as such, that there's we live in a world where they're going to be reminded of that group membership every single day. And it's that in of itself is an example of privilege.
I think privilege is something that it it can it can evoke feelings of weight and pressure, and I don't deserve this, and I didn't earn this. So I think depending on the person and what specific piece of privilege you're discussing, there's a number of things that could possibly come up. The interesting thing is that I think there are pieces of it that are being more and more uncovered as kind of normal to people nowadays that maybe weren't before. I think there was a point to where, if you consider, say, during the civil rights movement, a person of color could not sit in the front of the bus. You have to go to the back of the bus. So if you think of that, then that's very clear what privilege is. But I think that sometimes people don't acknowledge things like safety, your socioeconomic safety, having access to education for women, being able to drive, being able to buy a home on your own. And I remember having a conversation recently with a woman that used to work in finance in a previous career. And so, late 70s, early 80s, there had to be a man to do these things with you, even if that was your teenage son. So privilege is so much more layered than I think just religion, just race, just gender, just skin tone, and how you kind of face to the world. There's a number of things to it. But what can happen is that if you then kind of go catatonic from a place of I now can't because I can't do enough, then you're now wasting, so to speak, what you do have. And that in itself is more of a challenge than maybe the initial feelings of I have this privilege and what does that mean about me? Because if you have it, what is it that you can do with it? I I have things that make it so that I on the outside don't have the same privilege as some people. And it's not even just on the outside in a subjective kind of way, but I'm a Black woman. So there are some things that are going to show up because of my gender, because of being Black. There are going to be things that come up because I'm not skinny. There are going to be things that come up because my hair is natural, it's not straight. But I am food secure. I am home secure. I am cisgendered. So that's not a concern for me. I'm not non binary. I'm not trans. So those are other pieces where I don't have to worry about my safety. There's a number of things there. So therefore, that puts me in a place of how can I utilize what I have in order to bring attention to what is important to me, what is a part of my beliefs, ethics, and values for those that maybe don't have that same platform because of some of the privileges that I have and that they don't, the same way that someone else, like you could maybe say, well, I'm a white woman and I can see where if I said something, it may land different than if you did. And if that gives an opportunity for you to come in the room, for your voice to be heard, for you to have a seat at the table and actually be a part of change being made, this is how that whole thing can get moving.
Absolutely. So important. And that idea that using whatever power we do have for good for the idea of broadening access is it's so important. I went to a another conference recently where Ruth King was presenting. I don't know if you know her work on mindfulness and racism as a heart disease, but she was
Mhm.
talking about racism being perpetuated by a collusion of blindness, sameness, and silence. And I just loved
Mm.
that, right? There's some things that we just don't see because it's not part of our life experience. We have no idea that that might have been offensive or that, and so there's some degree of kind of like ignorance where when we are faced with that, we have an opportunity. Those of us who don't have the blindness have the opportunity to enlighten or point out gently, hey, like that's you might not want to say it that way, or like, hey, that could be seen as offensive. Sameness as the idea that of just hanging out with other people, quote unquote, like you, which prevents the very kind of conversations that you're talking about that are important. And then, of course, silence. If we don't bother to actually open our mouths and have those conversations, then nothing changes. Before we pressed record on this conversation, we were talking a little bit about showing up as our full selves in family situations. We're recording this a few weeks before Thanksgiving, before the holiday season kicks off, and so we all have, perhaps, maybe we don't all have, but many of us have people in our families who don't necessarily, who we might not necessarily feel like we can be our full selves around, or have we're prepared for, okay, well, I better keep my mouth shut around this person, or, those kinds of feelings of discomfort, or being not necessarily sure how to navigate situations with people that you care about, but who might not necessarily see the world in a similar way. What advice do you have for us on that topic?
I am a huge proponent of bringing your whole self to all tables that you choose to have a seat at. And holidays are no different. It is a literal table sometimes. So I think it is very important when this is supposed to be a season of gathering and connection and, family and support and things like this, to, even if it maybe isn't as present with the people that you're in the room with, because for some people, they're going to events with people that they maybe only see maybe, I don't know, 1 to 3 times a year. And sometimes even that can be a lot. So I think that it is important to stay true to you in moments like this, because that is the one thing that you know that you have as a constant if you are concerned about some of the individuals or some of the comments or just some of the energy that could be present. And I think that if you at least have that, that can sometimes give you something that you can ground down on. If you're kind of feeling like there's a lot going on here, at least that gives you something tangible that you can go back to. And I kind of think it's a little bit of a four-way thing in that you have a choice when things come up, because somehow family gatherings, there's, kind of this one person sometimes that can choose to bring up something that is wildly inappropriate at a wildly inappropriate time, kind of knowing what that's going to look like. They know that they're being controversial, and they also know that they're probably not going to get full pushback. So if you, for example, find yourself in that kind of situation and you are trying to figure out what to do, I think you kind of have two options, and each option has two options. You can choose to stay, or you can choose to leave. And the reason that I say that there's two options is because if you choose to stay, you can choose to say, I am not going to participate in this. I know exactly what this is. You will not bait me. So I will be quiet. I will eat my food. I will leave because I already knew what this was going to look like. I am not here to change your mind because I know what this is going to be. I am here to make my mom, dad, sister, whoever happy, check my block, whatever that is. And I am just not participating in this. Or you can choose to say, hey, this is not okay. You already know what I'm going to say to you, but I don't think that this is the time that we need to have this conversation. So if you want to talk to me later on, we can absolutely have this conversation. Let's talk then. And chances are they'll probably retreat in some way, shape, or form.
so kind of call their bluff, being like, all right, you're stirring shit up. I'm not going to bite that hook. But if you want to talk to me later, okay. But that's not what this is about. Don't ruin Thanksgiving for everyone.
Right. Everyone else has nothing to do with this. So you can do that. Now, if you choose to leave, leaving can be literally saying, hey guys, thanks for bringing me. I think it's time for me to go. And you can just leave, because you also do not have to subject yourself to something that is not conducive to your emotional, physical, or just spiritual well-being as a whole. Anything that is just not good for you, your mental health. If it's on the table with this person and you don't want it to be a bargaining chip, you can leave. You don't have to subject yourself to it. But if you choose to stay, you can still say, yeah, I'm not going to have this conversation. Can you please pass me the fill in the blank of whatever?
Yep, looking right past that, and I'm choosing to have. Yeah, so in that sense, having a conversation is choosing to not take the bait, and to not be as, I guess, predictable, that like, okay, yeah, what I'm about, that I'm going to speak up for myself or for this marginalized group who's not present to defend themselves. And so there's, but yeah, that's not what this particular gathering is about. I think that we could broaden that out to think about any political differences that may come up with extended family, or that the people that we not necessarily see every day or all the time. Erica, happens to those of us with perfectionist tendencies if we are trying to go to bat for someone, or we're trying to approach someone and yet we're still kind of caught up in, what if I do it wrong? What if this person thinks I'm being the white savior? Or what if I use the wrong pronouns talking to this trans person? Or that, what can you give us a way to recover from a slip up, either perceived or actual?
First of all, perfection does not exist. Second of all, humility is your friend. First of all, just being able to tell yourself that there's no such thing as perfection, it's a lie that just keeps you in inactivity. So when you allow yourself to be in action and you acknowledge that you are a human being, not doing, then you are allowing yourself that space to be open to learn. And that means that you may have missteps, and not labeling that as a fatal failure that you just cannot come back from. Because the reality is that we offend people, and it may not even be from a place of being an ally. And so if you say, well, I'm really sorry, I did not mean that, or I'm having a terrible day, that wasn't for you, I'm really sorry. I apologize. I acknowledge that was wrong. That was not what I meant to do. If you feel as though something happens and you acknowledge it, then from there, the only thing that you can do is keep going, because the only thing that is wrong is nothing. When you do nothing, that is when there is a problem, because none of us are perfect. And it is practically impossible to never have a time that there is a teachable moment for you or anyone else that's interacting with you in the realm of them trying to be supportive. If you are not sure, then you take the time and you make sure that you are giving yourself space to do your research or to be curious and just kind of inquire into the things that you're not sure about. Be open when information does come up. Don't be afraid to ask questions, but also remember to ask good questions. And I say that in the sense of, don't expect someone else to do your emotional labor. Yeah, I really want to know what it is that I can do to understand trans people better. That's now forcing one trans person to have to speak for every trans person. A better way would maybe say, is there anything that I could do that could be beneficial to you? I won't make you speak for everyone, but I want to learn. I want to be better. I want to do better. Is there anything that you could share with me, or anything you tell me to go do? You don't even have to, you don't have to do this for me. I don't want you to feel like this is your burden. You have enough burden. I won't now put the burden of doing the work as well on you.
I think there's like so many things in life, right? That point about perfection being an impossible metric that keeps us in inaction. We really do have to take that to heart. It's just like a meditation practice, right? There is no such thing as a perfect meditation. We're going to sit down, our minds are going to wander, because that's just what they do. And if we just decide that's it, meditation isn't for us, then we'll never get there. But if we give ourselves permission to be human, if we give ourselves permission to come back again and again and make it a practice, that basically allyship we could think about as a practice. That we're learning how to do it by doing it. There will be missteps along the way, owning it, apologizing it, having compassion for ourselves along the way, that our hearts are in the right place if in fact we are taking this up as a practice, and that it's in the service of trying to use our voices for good, and just recognizing that it's a way better alternative to nothing.
Well, and I think it's good to give yourself, that grace, because of the fact that it is very different to be a card carrying, hood wearing KKK member. And we kind of know what's going to come with something like that. That is very different than accidentally using the wrong pronoun. That is not the same thing. And I think that it's very easy for someone that maybe has it in their mind to be an ally, that they just kind of lump it all together, because then you'll have people that will sometimes, they can maybe censor themselves and they'll say, well, I'm not racist. And it's like, well, no one actually said that you were racist, because they immediately think of the worst case scenario. And that's not necessarily what that is. It means that you took an action that possibly had racist implications. Everyone has some in some way, shape, or form, because they have implicit biases, systemic things that we are taught and given on levels that we almost are unaware of sometimes. And being able to say, misspeaking when it comes to a pronoun and being able to then correct it is very different from calling someone a racial slur on a daily basis. They're
Yes.
not the same.
Yeah, exactly. And really just that idea that on that implicit bias point, that we can't help how we were raised, and we can't help how the people who raised those people were raised, and and all we can do is become aware of the biases that we did grow up with, that maybe we even have on a nervous system level and on a cellular level, and try to decolonize that with our consciousness.
Exactly. Exactly. And being able to acknowledge that sets you up way better than feeling like, oh, it's half empty. I can never get there because there's just no possible way that I could do this and not screw it up. I kind of make the comment sometimes that you're going to eat some Nike and that's okay. You're going to put your foot in your mouth. It's okay.
Nike.
That's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah, it is. Erica, this has been great. I really appreciate you sharing your mission and the kind of work that you do. If people are inspired to want to connect with you, where do they go?
I would love to connect with people. I actually do encourage people to have dialogue with me. I encourage them to start conversation with me. And I do that because if I don't stand by that, then it's kind of tough to tell you to go out and speak to the world. So it can even start here. My website is ericacourdae.com, and my handle is the same on Instagram at Erica Courdae. My podcast is Pause on the Play. So we have conversations around things like mindset, visibility, imperfect allyship, imperfect action, and more. And that is Pause on the Play. And we have a website for that as well. And that is pauseontheplay.com. We are doing Twitter, which is something very new to me. I'm like, let's see how this goes. So any of these places, by all means, come out, check me out, talk to me. If you go to the websites, they will have the social links, so you can feel free to go ahead and hop through there and just tell me some of the things that are coming up for you, and I can figure out how I can support you, because that's what I'm here for.
Awesome. Erica Courdae, thank you so much for joining me today on Healthy Curiosity.
Thank you, Brody.
Thanks for listening today. To check out the show notes, get on my email list, or drop me a line, head to brodywelch.com. That's Brody with an IE and Welch with a CH. I'd love to hear from you. If you learned something new or feel inspired to try something different in your life, I'd love for you to pay it forward by sharing this episode with a friend who you think could also benefit, and give them a reason to listen. You'll be helping to create a world where we encourage each other to embody self-respect. Till next time, be good to yourself.